Hi, this is Steve from PixelBump. Welcome to the After Effects Bootcamp on rotoscoping and the Rotobrush. So let's dive into After Effects a little bit and talk about how rotoscoping is used today. Here we have a nice shot of the lovely Lyra, and we'll see it's just a simple shot of her turning into frame. Now, why you would want to rotoscope this could be endless. You could want to be integrating text, or maybe a giant spider walks by, or maybe the Incredible Hulk wants to hand her some flowers. In any event, let's take a look at some of the techniques for rotoscoping out a piece of footage like this. The first couple of times I tried to rotoscope, I did what I think everybody does. You come in and you trace around the entire image. Now, this is a horrible way to rotoscope, because as she's going to move, we're going to have to update all of these points. And I'm doing this so loose and rough just to get it done quickly, but you would have to rotoscope so much tighter than this to realistically cut her out. And it would take forever to update all those many points. So instead, what I do is I break it down into groups, into pieces of objects that I can animate quickly and easily. So here, let's take this arm and let's zoom in so we can actually get a better look. And because this is a organic shape, I'm going to use the Roto Bezier, which kind of curves everything really nicely. It was a great addition to After Effects. Whenever I'm rotoscoping a person or an organic object, this is what I'm going to go and grab. So here we've got her upper arm and her shoulder. Let's add an extra point here so we don't get such heavy curve up there. And I'm going to rename this mask left arm, left upper arm. All right, so it's going to be really hard to kind of animate through this in this current condition. So what you can either do is duplicate the footage and put it underneath, or what I do is I just change the mode to none. So I'll still get to see all of my points, but I don't have to guess where the line needs to go to. So the first thing we'll do is we'll click on the stopwatch to set a keyframe position, and then I'll move forward like maybe 5 or 6 frames, and then I'll adjust. And depending on exactly how tight you need your roto to be is exactly how careful you want to be about moving these points. Sometimes you can leave it looser, sometimes you're going to need it to be extra tight. It really depends on the shot and what you're trying to do with it. So just keep adjusting these points until I get something that I'm pretty happy with as far as the position. And now what I'm going to do is come back and meet the frames in the middle and see how far we're off. Because when humans move, they don't move in exactly linear space, which is how After Effects does its keyframes. So we're just going to need a little adjustment there, and a little adjustment here. I mean, if you're really lucky, you'll get to go 2 or 3 frames without having to update your keyframes, but most likely you're going to keyframe pretty much every frame, and sometimes just in small ways. Like here, that actually looks pretty good to me. Actually, let's move this guy over just a touch. But that looks pretty good. So now I'll do another 6 keyframes, and I will move and update. And as you can guess, this is a pretty time-intensive process. But unfortunately, the options are pretty limited. A lot of motion graphics and VFX come down to rotoscoping. So let's go in between, and we'll make some adjustments. Now, if you click in between 2 points, you'll move that entire piece, or if you just click on a single point itself, you can move it with either the mouse or with your arrow keys. And I just keep my hands on the arrow keys while I'm doing this so that I can kind of on the fly make adjustments. That actually looks pretty good, pretty good. Over here, let's make a small adjustment. Let's go another 6. And if you double click on any point, it'll bring up a selection of all the points that you can move as a group. Then by hitting enter, you'll release it. So that way you can then go back to doing point by point movement. Adjust the shoulder a little bit. And as you can see, these roto points, the roto Bezier points, are doing a really nice job as I move them of following the organic form of the arm. All right, that is looking pretty good. Let's come back. Pretty good there. And we'll go to our last frame. And release it. Make an adjustment here. But other than that, oh, a little bit higher up there. Other than that I'm looking pretty happy with. So now we have a nice solid roto on that left upper arm. Now what we're going to want to do is repeat that process for other parts of Lyra. So I would mask out here the lower arm, and here I can leave it very rough because once we're into this section, we're probably going to have another mask take over. So there we've got the left lower arm, and we'll change that over to none. And let's see, what other pieces are we going to cut out? So we're going to need one for the right upper arm. And set that to none. We're going to need one for the right lower arm. Again, can get very loose once it's over the body. Set that to none. And then we'll do a shape here for the torso, because the torso will really just move on a pivot. It's not going to have a lot of twisting motion like an arm could. So we'll come here and grab that all. Just kind of move up the neck a little bit. Turn that back on. And oh no, I have no head. All right. So let's come in and we'll do one for the neck. Oops. I accidentally created a shape layer. If you don't have your footage highlighted and you start clicking with the pen tool, a shape layer automatically comes up. Click on the footage. I just prefer this method. It's how I learned to do it. There's, again, as I keep saying with a lot of this stuff, there's really no right or wrong way. There's just what works best for you. So now we have the neck, and we'll do the head and hair. And this is where it's going to get tricky, because you're going to kind of just try to follow the main shape of the hair. There's going to be flyaways you're going to lose unless you want to go back and do a very detailed pass, or maybe try to do a paint out kind of the way Max Fleischer used to do it in Photoshop. Well, not that he did it in Photoshop, but the same technique where you'll take a brush and a black and white mat and you'll trace individual areas. I have done it that way before. It was incredibly time consuming, but it was incredibly time consuming, but it did give me a really nice effect, I do have to be honest. So let's add everything back in, and now we have Lyra completely cut out. So let's take a simple solid here. Oops. Let's make that comp size. And we will add just a simple ramp to it. And we're starting to see now, by doing that, where we've gone off. On the original left arm, that's actually looking pretty solid. If I just come in to my feather control and add maybe a 2 pixel feather, you know, with the exception of a little cleanup here, I would buy that. Over here, we're getting a lot of spill. And one way to deal with that, let's click here, and if you hit M twice in rapid succession, you'll get the entire controls for your masks. And if it's something like this, we may just want to, let's turn off the helpers so we can click in here without seeing all of the lines. And let's check the expansion, and we can just pull that in just a little bit until we're happy with it. And then we can turn our helpers back on. And, you know, that's pretty solid. That's a pretty solid roto. To finish out this animation, it would be the exact same thing as with the left arm. We would just go a few frames ahead, update the positions, check the in-between frames, jump forward, check the in-between frames, jump forward, check the in-between frames. The Rotobrush has a similar process as when we did our tracking. We're going to double click on our footage to bring it up in the layer panel. Then we're going to come over here and click on the Rotobrush. Now, instead of trying to paint every piece of this, what we're going to do is just kind of start hitting the areas that we want to keep. So I'm going to come in here and do something like this. And it's going to have done its best to try to figure it out. Now, Lyra is wearing a very complex pattern, so some of the areas in here it didn't pick up. So what we do is we keep the green plus, and we just go through and swipe through those areas. And that's not bad, but we've now lost the area in between the arms where the fence should be showing through. So to do that, we need to knock it back out. And to knock it out, you hold down the Alt key and click, and then hold down the Alt key and click until you've pretty much got what you're looking for. And it's just going to be a battle back and forth of I want that, I don't want that. You're trying to teach After Effects what colors to include and what colors to ignore. So up here, I don't want any of that green around her head. And this could get very tricky because we are dealing with dark hair and shadows and leaves together, and a brownish hair with a brownish fence. So this may take quite a bit of finessing. But the process is very similar. So I'm going to jump ahead 5 frames here. I'm going to let it show me how it did, and I'm not liking this completely, but it's not bad. It has figured out over those 5 frames a pretty good approximation. But right here we lose a little bit of the dress, so I want to pull that back in. Go forward. That's looking pretty good. So let me jump forward another 5 frames. And we've lost a little bit more of the hair here than I would really like. And I want to see what happens with the fence. No, that actually worked here well in the arm. I'm very happy with that. And it turns out that piece of hair that I didn't want to lose was actually not included at the beginning. So I need to come back to the beginning here and just kind of adjust that a bit. So we'll pop forward those 5 frames, pop forward a few more, and we are still losing that hair about right here. So let me go in and just kind of very quickly adjust what it's keeping. The rest of the body's looking nice. Still losing that hair. Not, like I said, this is a bit of a complex problem, and it's doing the best it can. Too much. But we just need to kind of keep coming in and making these adjustments. So I'm just going to frame by frame it at this point. much. And again, kind of like with the regular rotoscoping, it's going to be a little bit of back and forth. It's going to be a little bit of nudge here, nudge there. But, you know, in about the same amount of time that it's taken me to do all of this, and just really only having to focus on this one area of the hair that's a little problematic, we're getting the entire roto in the same amount of time it took me to do that one arm. We have lost a little more of the dress here, which I can start to see is becoming problematic in this time range. So I'm just going to come back, clean that up a bit. And it's, you know, pretty common that you'll need to take a few passes through it because you'll be focused on one area, clean it up, clean it up, clean it up, find another area that needs to be cleaned up, clean it up, clean it up, clean it up. All right, let's go back because the rest of the body is still is starting to look really good. So I just want to focus on this hair again for a little bit. Just make sure that we can get to the end of this clip without Lyra's head shrinking, which would probably be not a good thing. You know, she's a pretty lady and she should be treated as such. Her husband's probably going to kill me. All right, so there we go. We're to the end. And I'm pretty happy with it. At the very end here, we start to pick up a little bit of a gap in the hands. So I'm going to hold down the control key and shrink my brush down a little bit. Hold down the control key will either grow or shrink the brush depending on which direction you go. Hold down the Alt key. Let's get rid of that. And now we'll track backwards, get rid of it. Track backwards, get rid of it. Oops. Oop. Too many keys there. Keep that. Release that. There we go. There we go. That's looking pretty solid. All right, so I'm pretty happy with how this is starting to look. So let's go in and freeze our roto brush. By clicking the freeze, it is going to stop trying to calculate and it's going to cache out the frames. All right, our freeze is done. We can click back over to our composition panel and we'll see a lot of jaggies. This is very, very normal. We're going to need to come in and we're going to need to reduce the chatter a bit. And let's feather it a bit more, get a nicer, softer edge to it. And let's see here, we've got some dark areas along the arms. So let's go ahead and shift the edge, just eat away at it a little bit. And like I said, in about the amount of time it took to do one arm, we've done an entire person. We still have a little issues with the hair up here, but overall this is getting very acceptable. Now the next thing I want to show you is I'm going to unfreeze this and I'm going to show you a little bit of the Refine Edge tool. Because this area of hair is getting a little problematic, what I want to try to do is come in and see if I can get some of that detail back. Some of those nicer flyaways. And let's go ahead and bring it to the end. See how well this will hold. Since we've already done the main rotoing, this should hold pretty well, and it does. Looks like it holds on really nicely. So let's go back to it. Let's freeze this again. And you can see this beautiful black-white matte. A lot of extra detail is being brought back in. And we'll go back to our composition. And now we have much more detailed hair. We have a bit of flicker happening, and that's okay. So we're going to come down here and we're going to turn on the chatter reduction. I'm going to bring it up pretty high and give that a test. See how that looks. And I can already tell that is looking much, much better. The flicker is almost gone. We may want to bring this up a bit more. Maybe smooth it out a little bit. And again, don't be afraid to push these values high. Just because I entered 5, don't feel the need to enter 5. Try 50. Why not? See what that does. A lot of the time you spend in After Effects, you're going to spend just racking these values back and forth. Never feel that you should enter in the value that I do or anyone else does. But that is starting to look really good. A little more refinement and I think the shot will be done. So that brings us to the end of this video. I hope you've learned something that you can use in your work. Join us in the next video for paint outs and removals. Thank you so much for watching. Go and create.